Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on renewed discussions over ditching time changes. But first, appealing to decision makers.
The closure of the Lacombe Research and Development Centre creates an economic and social shock to my community of 15,000.
To forego research and development in a sector that contributes so significantly to Canada's GDP is not finding efficiencies, it is being short-sighted.
Municipal leaders from our province advocating in the nation's capital for the Lacombe Research and Development Centre, a 119-year-old agricultural facility targeted for closure as part of federal government efforts to reduce the size of the public service. And joining us now, Talia Hibbs, Mayor of Lacombe, and John Ireland, Reeve for the County of Lacombe. Hello. Welcome to the studio. It's great to have both of you here with us to talk about this.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Right. As we saw in the footage there, you both appeared before, I believe it's the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. And Mayor Hibbs, in your testimony, and we just heard it there in the clip, you equated the closure of the centre to economic and social shock in your community.
Certainly.
A city of 15,000. Can you put that into perspective for us?
Sure. So, we are a small city, but because we're a small city, when you have a facility that's that large, it's one of our largest employers slated for closure, that has an impact. That means people are leaving our community and the contributions that they have given to our community now cease. Spouses may also own businesses or work in the city. We've got children that attend school that may no longer be there. These are hockey coaches. It does have a social impact, but it also has that economic impact. The businesses are affected. You have a major employer, but also a major purchaser locally. So that source dries up. So small businesses are now going to struggle because they've lost a significant, source of income. So it definitely has a ripple effect locally, but it definitely has it for the region as well as nationally.
Reeve Ireland, why is it important that the research that is done at this facility remain in the Lacombe area? Are there not other organizations, facilities doing similar research that would be of equal benefit?
There are other research stations that do similar research, but it's in their area, their region, which is very different. In Lacombe, we have black soils. We have a significant amount of rainfall. A lot of areas, let's take Lethbridge, for example, they are prairie, where we are black soil. So, I mean, for the most part, we're comparing apples to oranges.
Why not leave it to the corporate sector? Why does this have to be a government-driven operation?
Public research is foundational and is ongoing. It builds on itself year after year. Private research is credible information as well, but it's usually tied with a marketing plan associated with it. So it tends to be shorter term. They're looking for a return on investment over a 3 or 4 year period and to shareholders as opposed to the larger agricultural community.
Mayor Hibbs, in advocating to keep the facility open, you're asking the government for a pause. Why are you seeking a pause? Or what exactly is it that you're hoping that they will do?
Well, we haven't been provided any justification as to why they decided to close this specific site and the other sites that they chose. And so we really want to be reassured that they've done any sort of investigation as to what the consequences of those closures are. We don't feel that that has been done. And so we want them to take a pause and reevaluate that decision so that they really truly understand what those final consequences are. Once research discontinues in that site and the properties potentially disposed of, that is a century worth of research that you can't just restart somewhere else. That's permanently lost and will have a profound impact on our agricultural sector.
So that's like weighing the cost of what it takes to keep it open against
short-term gain of savings potentially, but what are the long-term effects of those cuts? Are they going to be greater than what you've saved in the small short term?
Reeve Ireland, there's political element to this. You're a producer as well, right? So how does this play at a time when we see federal government, we see the PM, federal government officials traveling the world, seeking out new markets for our products, seeking out new trade partnerships?
Well, it's frustrating on the local level as well to see that research is perhaps being sacrificed. In agriculture, we have a world-class product, and in order to maintain our status on the global front, we need that foundational research to generate upwards through our farming sector to return benefit to Canada's GDP.
The two of you are obviously working together. Mayor Hibbs, how are you engaging the residents of your community about this? What's happening at the ground level?
So we did start right away with a joint task force and let the community know what it was that we were wanting to do. Definitely encouraging everybody to reach out to us with their thoughts and concerns. We reached out to industry, we reached out to the local government, MLA and MP. We've been doing all that we can to encourage people to be involved in this, that this is important, that they can make a difference, that we're there to help facilitate getting that message out. But anything that they need to know from us, we've been trying to share information on our prospective web pages so that people can access that information. But it is really important that we are sharing the information with residents and that they feel comfortable coming to us, whether it's elected or administration, to find out more about what's going on, what can they do.
Reeve Ireland, did you get any kind of commitments from the good folks in Ottawa?
Well, no, and they're not in a position to make commitments. They're in a position to make recommendations. So they listen to the testimony of numerous witnesses, and at the end of that, they collate what they've heard and come up with a recommendation that they put back to the Minister of Agriculture for status quo or acceptance or a change of some sort.
Okay, well, obviously you're going to keep the pressure on, but Mayor Hibbs, do you have a backup plan?
There is no backup plan. We are going to keep seeking out every avenue of advocacy at this point. Obviously, the committee hearings are not complete yet, so there's room for an optimism there. We're going to continue to have conversations with both the provincial and federal. We're going to continue to have conversations with industry, with local farmers, just everybody that we could possibly reach out to, so that we have a united front to come up with some solution. There's many options. We just need the federal government to be willing to engage on that and come up with a way to have the research continue. There is a way. We will find it.
Well, I'll maybe squeeze in one more quick question. County of Newell took over Crop Development Center. It used to be the provincial government's organization in the Brooks area. Yep. Is there a possibility that as municipalities you could look at something like that too?
That's probably what Plan B is a joint venture, maybe with the province, commodity groups, potentially with municipalities. I guess where we have the frustration is the fact that the decision was made, there was no consultation, there was no, acknowledgement that this research station is a vital part of our history and of our future. So
it's been there 119 years.
Well, it is. And the thing that I constantly say is it's more relevant today in our area than it has been at any point in those 120 years.
All right. We have to leave it there for time. Thank you both for coming in. Great to get your perspectives on this.
Thank you very
so
much.
From revived discussions on ditching time changes to the fight to save a major agriculture research facility from the federal chopping block, and what conflict in the Middle East means here at home. Time now for tonight's politics panel, and joining us this evening, Charlene Smenza, newly retired political science faculty member at MacEwan University, and Rob Breckenridge, writer, broadcaster, and columnist for the Calgary Herald. Good evening to you both, and let's begin with time change discussions being thrust back into the spotlight thanks to what's happening next door.
British Columbia is going to change our clocks just one more time and then never again.
BC moving to remain permanently on daylight saving time, a move that had more than 90% support of BC residents when voted on back in 2019. Alberta had a referendum on time change in 2021, with 50.2% of those voting wanting to keep the clocks moving twice a year. Now, in a statement, Premier Smith says the Alberta government will take the BC developments under consideration and evaluate whether a similar change would be in the best interest of Albertans. Chaldeans, what do you see driving this decision by the BC government? What makes this a necessary move now?
Well, Mr. Eby points to the need to have an independent BC decision that is not linked to the Pacific U.S. states. So I guess this is part of the resistance to the United States and carving out a Canadian independent approach. But I should remind you, Michael, that Mr. Eby, when he was Attorney General, was advocating for synchronization of the time change with the U.S. Pacific states. So I think he's changed his position. But indeed, this is a very popular move, and he's come down with a budget with a $13 billion deficit. So this is a good way to shift public attention from some of his economic challenges in his province.
Rob, this will mean Alberta's going to be sandwiched between two provinces that do not spring forward or fall back. What kind of position does that leave the Smith government in? Does it force Alberta's hand?
Yeah, it might. I mean, it's interesting. BC is a weird kind of quirky system because you've got, I believe the city of Creston has always just kind of done its own thing, and they never changed their clocks. Then you've got the eastern part of BC that is aligned with Alberta. They're on mountain time. And so, does Alberta have to respond, for some of those reasons? And you're right. I mean, Saskatchewan on one side doesn't change their clocks. Now BC won't either. It's something for Alberta to think about. Whereas, BC had a little more, I guess, kind of overwhelming support for a change. It was pretty divided here in Alberta when we voted back in, I guess it was 2019. I think it was like 50.2% said, let's just leave things as they are. And now with both our neighbors on kind of a different setup. Now, I do wonder if that sort of tips the other way. So you heard the Premier this week, and I mean, she said, yeah, it might be something we're going to have to take another look at. And I think the point is also true that this is a little bit of a distraction from some other issues going on and some political headaches for both BC's Premier and Alberta's Premier. But at the same time, I think it's something that the people do have strong feelings about.
Chaldeans, would the possibility of Alberta following in BC's footsteps, would that require another referendum given the narrow margin on that last vote, the last time Albertans had a say?
Well, Michael, I think BC is ahead. This is the direction that seems to be the people want the permanent daylight savings time. I don't think we need another referendum. Politicians have to make a decision. Even in the United States, the Congress, there's a bill called the Sunshine Protection Act. It's being caught up there. Eventually will come up. So the trend is to move to permanent daylight savings time. The politicians have to make a decision. We don't need another referendum. I think it's time to make a decision on this issue.
All right. Next up, we heard from the Mayor of Lacombe and the Reeve of Lacombe County off the top of the program on their efforts to keep the local agriculture research facility off the chopping block as the federal government moves to reduce the size of the public service. Rob, both appeared before a Commons committee in Ottawa late last week. What's to be made of the fight they're putting up? What weight do you see it carrying?
Well, I mean, it comes at an interesting moment right now. I think, with the conversation around Alberta's sort of place in Confederation, are we getting a raw deal? Much is made of how much tax is collected in Alberta versus how much federal spending is in Alberta. So I think if there's a perception that we're being singled out and whatever federal spending there is in Alberta is being scaled back, and if we're not seeing that elsewhere, I think that sort of plays into some of these overall themes about unfair treatment from Ottawa. Look, I think we need to be realistic about the situation the federal government finds itself in, both in terms of, trying to keep the economy above water right now, in major investments in the military, everything else this federal government is trying to manage right now, that there does need to be a serious look at the federal bureaucracy and the federal spending. And I don't think it's fair either to say Alberta should be immune from that, but I do think it's one of those instances where even the specifics of it, people might not be intimately familiar with this particular facility or what it does. I think it sort of plays into some of those broader themes right now.
Chaldeans, they've asked for a pause of 12 to 18 months, a validation period of sorts to allow for a cost-benefit analysis compared to savings with long-term impact. What would it take to push the federal government to greenlight such a pause?
I think, Michael, first of all, this whole situation is a consequence of poor financial management over the past decade or so. So now it's come time for the government to try to reduce spending, reduce the government bureaucracy, and this is the consequence of it. But I think that in this particular instance, we also have to link it up to the overall geopolitical realities out there. Countries are now trying to secure their own food security because of uncertainty over tariffs. And this is a time to protect our farmers, giving them the ability to be able to compete. And I think the research foundation is important. So I think they should find other places to be making cuts. I agree that cuts have to be made because the government has been spending too much money. But this one is a particular sore point because it hurts farmers, it hurts rural communities, and I think the impact is going to be felt very, very badly in the localities that are impacted by this.
All right, time for us to take a bit of a break, but when we come back, conflict in the Middle East and the political conversation it's driving right here at home. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. Conflict in the Middle East continues to widen in the wake of the U.S. and Israel launching strikes on Iran over the weekend. And while our premier wants the war to end soon, Danielle Smith says more countries will turn to Canadian oil if the conflict persists.
It just underscores the need for our 1 million barrel a day bitumen pipeline to the West Coast, because if this kind of uncertainty continues, it just demonstrates that the world and our trading partners and allies need to have a stable source of supply, and that's what we are.
The conflict is driving up global oil prices, and Alberta's finance minister says it is too soon to say if higher crude prices could lower our province's deficit, which was based on $60 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate trading today above 75 US a barrel. Chaldeans, let's start first with the conflict itself. What do you see motivating the U.S. involvement? Is it as simple to say this is an attempt to bring democracy to Iran?
Well, I think, Michael, we've received different motivations for this action, but I think profoundly the United States wanted to destroy the nuclear capability of potential nuclear capability of Iran. They also were concerned about Iran's support for its proxy forces in the region, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. So, and another aspect which has been tangentially referred to is supporting the domestic opposition. Nobody wants a regime change, but I think that is also part of the equation that seems to be motivating this spiraling attack.
Right, we just see images there of Donald Trump. How does U.S. involvement play with the president's peacemaker image, his desire for the Nobel Peace Prize?
Well, I don't think it's going to help that cause for sure. And I mean, you're sort of seeing a split, I think, amongst the president's supporters over whether this is, should be on the table in the first place. I mean, you don't have to go far back to find examples of, Trump himself and other affiliated MAGA figures, accusing, the Democrats of wanting to start war with Iran. Even Trump accusing Obama when he was president of wanting to start war with Iran. And last, 2024 in the election, the accusation that, it was the Democrats that were somehow going to go down this path. So I think you're seeing some MAGA types who believed all of that and still believe all of that. So you're seeing a split right now. And I think at the same time, the Democrats are raising some legitimate questions around what exactly is the point of all of this, what exactly is the strategy and the end game here, and even the president's own justifications. He's spoken with various reporters who were just kind of cold calling him, which is strange, but he's sort of given different answers and different explanations around all of this. So I think there's some confusion amongst allies for sure, and I think even amongst the American people as to what's going on here, what the objectives are, and why we're doing all of this. And you've seen some of the sort of tepid response from Canada here, basically saying, look, we support taking out Iran's nuclear program or being an obstacle to Iran getting a nuclear weapon, that we certainly recognize the evils and atrocities of the Iranian regime. But stopping short of sort of a full-throated endorsement of all of this, and we certainly, I don't think we're going to see any extensive Canadian participation at this point.
Chaldeans, if we look now to the home front, to what degree do you see this changing the conversation around need for the pipeline that the Premier is pushing for to the West Coast?
Well, I think, Michael, this whole scenario that is developing in the Middle East with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz really points out the importance of having a Canadian response in terms of supplying energy to our allies. Now, if you take this in the context of what Mr. Trudeau made, the LNG, export, there was no business case for an LNG export. Our allies in Europe are clamoring now that Qatar is not capable of supplying them. So, no, we need a pipeline to the West Coast. The time to develop it is now. We've had all kinds of obstacles within the domestic realm to this kind of development, but the Premier is correct. Canada needs a pipeline that is going to be supplying so that we are able to help our allies in case of these kind of unforeseen circumstances.
Rob, you wrote in the Herald today about last week's budget and the Smith government's embrace of deficits and record-level spending. Safe to say this conflict in the Middle East may be triggering a considerable sigh of relief in the Premier's office?
Well, it is, and I think both on the pipeline front, as was just noted. Look, I don't know that we're competing directly for customers with Iranian oil, but I think overall it helps Alberta's case for a pipeline, and I think this at the same time also kind of comes to the rescue of Alberta's finances a little bit here. So the Premier, was. I think intentionally pretty somber in talking about this conflict because it is a conflict and people's lives are being affected. And it's important to recognize that, but it's also impossible to ignore the impact all of this has on Alberta, especially as we saw in pretty stark terms last week, just what, shambles the Alberta budget is in right now, pretty massive deficit this year. Remember, we've got $13 billion in oil revenues budgeted, and yet still a $9 billion deficit. That's an enormous gulf. Budgets deficits for the next few years, for the foreseeable future. This could change all of that, and could change all of that in a hurry. We're already seeing oil prices spike this week. We've seen it in the very recent past, just the impact that has. Remember the whole conversation when the Alberta government paused the gasoline tax. Yeah. When oil prices are at that level, and we do feel the pinch on the affordability side, Alberta has some flexibility to take those kinds of steps. So it could be a pretty drastic shift as the Alberta government is, bracing for these massive deficits to maybe things swinging the other way. And that's how it goes with the royalty roller coaster.
And we're out of time. Gents, we have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you.
See you, Michael. Take care. Bye-bye.
That is our show for this evening. Remember, you can always have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow, we'll find out why labor groups are planning a province-wide day of protest for May 29th. The Alberta Federation of Labor's Gil McGowan joins us Wednesday at 6 and 11. Until then, have a great evening, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.